Hi everyone, I have my own theory about the Exodus, and to know that no one really cares, but I have been sick now for a really long time and I'm even worse off now and already have OCD and Tourette, so that should earn me a couple of sympathy votes, because after all, somebody who's sick and who has this kitty face, yes it's a kitty face, totally deserves sympathy votes, even though he's really not good at anything. I mean, it got me out of the Nuremberg trials, and it also even caused the Soviets to have mercy on me. Yes, I can get the Soviets to have mercy on me. I work on their soft side. I proved I was the soft side. Yet I'm the most evil human being that ever lived. And I then encouraged them to kill some more Jews, because the Soviets did it too, although people don't want to talk about that, because Americans sided with them. But I'm totally getting off track. And acting like a dark psychopath in another Catholic apologist video. But, that's still just kind of my sense of humor. Because I have Tourette, so you can't judge me. It's a smart shield, yes. As Catholics, we don't have to believe every word of the Bible, right? We can be a little bit critical of it. And to think that the length of time that the Bible states that the Jews were in Egypt, the duration of 430 years, was actually an error and a miscalculation. But other than that, I do think the Exodus actually happened close to how the Bible describes it, and also in a Prince of Egypt style, because that was a wonderful movie, wasn't it? I should totally do a review of that. I thought that all of the characters were very three-dimensional, and hey, now I'm back to being a movie critic. It's fun how that comes together. Okay, it's forced, I'll admit that. But so I think that most people get the date severely wrong. I think it happened around 1700 BC, during the late Middle Kingdom of Egypt, not during the New Kingdom, just before the Hyksos invaded the country. I think these two events were actually extremely interconnected. And nowadays a lot of secularists think that the Exodus was a myth, because they think there is lack of archaeological evidence showing such a mass exodus. However, I think they have been looking in the wrong place and the wrong time, and also have had too high standards. First of all, any attempt to date Exodus in the New Kingdom from 1550 BC till 1100 BC fails, as at that time the Egyptian Empire had control over all of Canaan and parts of Syria. So the Jews would just be fleeing to territory controlled by the Egyptians, to another province of Egypt. That's like Second World War Jews fleeing in 1942 from Germany to Austria. What good is that gonna do? But it would make sense if they did so in 1946, when Austria wasn't controlled by the Germans yet. And I'm sorry for bringing up the Holocaust again. So some speculate it was after 1100 BC, but that simply makes the period of Judges way too short. About 20 years or something. So I speculate it was before the New Kingdom. I think it was during the Middle Kingdom. Why? Well, because there actually are Egyptian sources, multiple ones, describing the 10 plagues. And this is something that atheists totally like to overlook. There's archaeological material that some archaeologists, such as William F. Albright, have considered historical evidence of the 10 plagues. For example, an ancient water trough found in El Arish bears hieroglyphic markings detailing a period of darkness, and that couldn't have been an eclipse because they already knew what eclipses were back then. Albright and other Christian archaeologists have claimed that such evidence, as well as a careful study of the areas ostensibly traveled by the Israelites after the Exodus, makes discounting the biblical account attainable, and I totally agree with that. And the Egyptian Ipuwer papyrus describes a series of calamities befalling Egypt, including a river turned to blood, men behaving as wild ibises, and the land generally turned upside down. But Wikipedia notes where I got this from. However, this is usually thought to describe a general and long-term ecological disaster, which is very speculative, lasting for a period of decades, again speculative, such as that which destroyed the Old Kingdom, although, as they will later on note, that this could also have been what destroyed the Middle Kingdom, which went down in a similar way, because the Old Kingdom was struck by drought and by many wars, but plagues were more specifically a thing of the late Middle Kingdom, especially diseases, which some historians think also contributed to the fall of the Middle Kingdom and made the invasion of the Hyksos a lot easier. But the document is usually dated to the end of the Middle Kingdom, or more rarely to its beginning, fitting the Old Kingdom destruction. But Wikipedia notes that in both cases it would be long before the usual theorized dates for the Exodus. Now, some have actually tried to put the Exodus at the end of the Old Kingdom, but that would make the period of Judges way too long, and just would it make sense as that would be around the time of Abraham. However, at the end of the Middle Kingdom is still totally possible, and so the Egyptians actually give sources confirming the plagues, but at the end of the Middle Kingdom, exactly the period I think the Exodus happened, and actually already thought so long before learning of the papyrus scroll and those hieroglyphics. So we killed two birds with one stone here. The Egyptian kings during the Middle Kingdom didn't rule in Canaan or Syria, and this is when the plagues happened, so the Exodus happened in a time Canaan actually was a safe haven. And also it solves another problem. If it happened around 1700 BC, this would mean that Egypt was hit by disasters according to the Bible, in a time we know from secular sources it actually was, at the end of the Middle Kingdom, which was a period of disasters. Being kind of redundant, but moreover, I really suck at making videos. I hate myself. So feel pity for me and give me thumbs up to make me feel better. That's the Catholic spirit. Yes, I'm taking advantage of that. Catholics can't vote down videos from other Catholics. We're brothers and sisters. By the way, I'm not mocking that. I actually believe in that. I just have a sense of humor. It's the Tourette thing. Moreover, so, in this time, Egypt did have many other cultures and people integrated into its society, mainly the lower classes, including Semitic people. Some of you might also be wondering why I'm sick so often. Well, apparently it turns out that committing incest and cannibalism actually has negative consequences. I guess I should have listened to the church. But then again, that's true for a lot of liberal Catholics, but I'm the one who gets crapped on, you know? Committing contraceptives? Well, we'll condone it. But cannibalism? No, that's going too far. It's just argument about populum. Cannibalism really isn't that horrible. But where was I? Oh yeah, this is how some think the Hyksos originally came to Egypt, as partially peaceful immigrants. That's still a matter of debate. But the Bible describes Egypt as being a place where many cultures merged, so that very well fits the Middle Kingdom, as the Old Kingdom was very organized and very static and very much a unified singular culture, and New Kingdom was also more imperialistic. And also the Bible doesn't describe Egypt as becoming less powerful in the time that Joseph and his descendants stayed in Egypt, so it had to be within one kingdom period. So they clearly also came during the early Middle Kingdom. And I think that was, as some other people already think, under Senusret II, who was very involved with agriculture, just as the Pharaoh of Joseph from Genesis was, and whose authority was also somewhat more decentralized, and whose authority was strengthened by Joseph. And his successors would actually finally do away with the power of the nobility completely. And also, I think that Sobek-Hotep III was the pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, as he lived a lot later. But as the Jews were there for many generations, starting off very powerful, their influence probably declined over the course of the reigns of many pharaohs, still why after the death of Joseph, maybe even after the death of his first couple of descendants. Further, Moses wasn't a name used at all in the 6th century, so the idea that the Exodus would be composed around that time is totally unlikely. For Variants of it, on the other hand, were used by Egyptians in the early New Kingdom, like Amos, Tutmosis I, the II, and the III, supporting the more traditional dating, but also at the end of the Middle Kingdom, with a pharaoh called Tutmosis I, who I think was the pharaoh of the oppression, who would logically name an adopted son Moses, especially his son, who I think was the pharaoh of the Exodus, and Moses' adoptive brother was called Tutmosis II. However, during the end of the Middle Kingdom, the name was actually rare, coinciding with the specialness of the name in the Bible, unlike during the New Kingdom. But also the Hyksos coming shortly after this solves a number of other problems. The lack of explicit references to the Exodus in Egyptian archives is explained by the destruction of the Hyksos and the chaos that came with it. As the struggle lasted for 150 years, till the New Kingdom, it makes sense they didn't try to get revenge on the Jews in Canaan, as they had by that time forgotten about them and were occupied with the remnants of the Hyksos invasion anyways. And the supposed lack of archaeological evidence is simply explained by the fact that we have been looking in the wrong time period, and that it is intertwined with the trails of arrival and expulsion of the Hyksos, and they also were Semitic people and interchangeable with the Jews who didn't circumcise during their travel in the desert and hadn't gotten the Mosaic laws of purity yet. This connection with the Hyksos is also tested by ancient historians, as Wikipedia reads. The most famous is by the Egyptian historian Manetho in the 3rd century BC, known from 2 quotations by the 1st century AD Jewish historian Josephus. In the first, Manetho describes the Hyksos, their lowly origins, Asia, their domination over and expulsion from Egypt, and the subsequent foundation of the city of Jerusalem and its temple. And Josephus, not Manetho, identifies the Hyksos with the Jews. And in the second story, Manetho tells how 80,000 lepers and other pure people led by priests named Osterseth join forces with the former Hyksos now living in Jerusalem to take over Egypt, and they wreak havoc until eventually the Pharaoh and his sons chase them out to the border of Syria, where Osterseth gives the lepers a lockout and changes his name to Moses. And Manetho differs from the other writers in describing his renegades as Egyptians rather than Jews, and in using a name other than Moses for the leader, although the identification of Osterseth with Moses may be a later addition. Also, the Exodus, similar to how it was described in the Bible, was attested by ancient authors, as Wikipedia again reads. The earliest non-biblical account of the Exodus is in the writings of the Greek author Hesychius of Abdera, the Egyptians blame a plague on foreigners and expel them from the country, whereupon Moses, their leader, takes them to Canaan, where he founds the city of Jerusalem, and Hesychius wrote in the late 4th century BC, but some claim the passage is quite possibly an assertion made in the mid-1st century BC. And by the way, this is incredibly important, so listen closely. I have absolutely no patience for the desperate claim that multiple of these references were later insertions, as Wikipedia asserts some historians propagate. That's just low. Were Jews back then really that desperate for representing the history to pagans, even though they didn't practice proselytization? And is there any proof for this claim? And also make this accusation not once but twice. Really? And also, as Jehovah's Witnesses point out on their site, and I can't believe I'm using this, many of the details of Egyptian culture are profoundly accurate, like as they state the position of the Egyptians with respect to foreigners, the separation from them, yet their allowance of them in their country, the special hatred of shepherds, the suspicion of strangers from Palestine as spies, their eternal government, its settled character, the power of the king, the influence of the priests, the great works, the employment of foreigners in their construction, the use of bricks, and of bricks with straw on them, the taskmasters, the embalming of dead bodies, the consequent importance of spices, the violent mournings, the fighting with horses and chariots. These are a few out of the many points which might be noted, making an intimate knowledge of Egyptian manners and costumes on the part of the author of the Pentateuch. The historical evidence of the truth of scripture, records by George Rawlinson, 1862, page 290-291, which I think is actually a very strong source that the Jehovah's Witnesses use to show they sometimes can really rely on reasons and outside sources. Sometimes. Hey, I'm standing up for Jehovah's Witnesses. We should always stand up for those that are different, especially if everybody bullies them. Lutherans have this mainstream accepted position, Pentecostals are starting together, but let's all hate on Jehovah's Witnesses together, even though they do really try to follow the Bible. They're still heretics, of course, but so are Lutherans, and Calvinists, and evangelicals, and Anglicans. Yes, and I know I'm ruining a lot of ecumenics here. And there are also a lot of schismatics, like the Eastern Orthodox, basically all non-Catholics. So what does it matter? Extra ecclesiam nullis salus. Yes, that's still a doctrine, except for those who don't know of the Catholic Church, because it isn't their fault. Let's make it clear, this applies even to non-Catholic Christians, even Eastern Orthodoxes. Yes, I'm reopening that debate. Also, they even very skillfully used the Pharaoh's daughter bathing in the Nile to prove the accuracy of the Exodus. The account of the Pharaoh's daughter bathing in the Nile has been disputed, but Herodotus says, as ancient monuments also show, that in ancient Egypt the women were under no restraint, and also the Egyptians believed a sovereign virtue existed in the Nile waters. At times pharaohs went out to the river evidently for purposes of worship. It was there that he was met at least twice by Moses during the 10 plagues. Also, don't dare to try and write that off to the Jews who fled to Egypt from the Babylonians. As I'm pretty sure that the stay of the Jews in Babylonia wasn't that luxurious, that not only could they fully write down their own history and form Levitic priesthood, but that they could also freely travel to their friends in Egypt to write their anti-Babylonian propaganda as long as they were back before bedtime. So yes, I think the Exodus actually happened in Egypt around 1700 BC at the end of the Middle Kingdom, and well, there was my theory now. It was kind of an abrupt ending, but fuck off. Bye. Have a nice day.